What would you want to say to young women who are considering joining the brewing industry, but are like afraid to or feel like it's maybe not their place?
Take up space.
There's been a reckoning over the past 5 years about women being excluded in the beverage industry. I've done hours of research in the past week, specifically about this issue, trying to find the historical through line. Because in the 1300s, women were the main brewers. And now, women are starting to reclaim that title. There was a long era where women were explicitly excluded from the industry. So, how did we get here?
At the brewery and bottling plant I worked at last summer, only about 10% of the employees were women. In the larger food and beverage industry, only about 36% of the employees are women. And at companies like Heineken, where they are taking active steps to try and increase the percentage of their workforce that is women, only about 30% of their employees are women. In the UK, it was reported that only 3% of working brewers were women. So I was trying to figure out why this was. Why are women so excluded in the alcoholic beverage industry? To really understand why this is, we're going to need to start over 4,000 years ago. Our story will take us through indigenous societies, through the Middle Ages in England, through the Prohibition era in the United States, and eventually bring us to modern times with some interviews with active working women in the brewing industry.
If we start in the very, very ancient times, women worked as the main brewers in societies. Going back to the indigenous people in North America and in Australia, people in ancient Babylon and ancient Egypt, almost all of their beer was made primarily by women. So, if women were the primary brewers in that time, what about in, let's say, medieval times? In medieval Europe, women acted as the main brewsters. Brewster is the term at the time for a woman who makes beer or ale. In England in the 14th century, there were very few options of drinks to drink. People weren't really drinking water or milk. The main beverage of choice was either ale or beer, with 17 million barrels of ale and beer produced per year on average in the 1300s. In the 14th century, women were the primary brewsters, also known as alewives, and they were known a little bit at the time for wearing like hats that came to a point, having black cats, and using brooms to sweep things out of the way, which is why in modern times, sometimes people say that they are what witches are based on. Now, in reality, this is a historical myth that has been debunked many times, but that kind of gives you a bit more of a picture of what a brewster was doing. In 1300 also, it was about 1 in 5 brewsters was a single woman, with the remaining 4 out of 5 almost all being married women. In this era, I see beer and brewing as a form of empowerment for women. Women who otherwise wouldn't have been able to work a job are able to get a job because they are working in the brewing industry. And in this era, it seems to me that the relationship between women and brewing was very positive. And as we get later in time, you will see that relationship start to degrade. Most brewsters at the time had very small productions in the early 1300s. It wasn't until somewhere around the 1500s that the brewing industry started to industrialize very rapidly. And as the brewing industry industrialized and began to thrive, it went from women being some of the main people running the brewing industry into women slowly being kicked out as their ability to brew was stolen from them by men. By the time we made it to 1500, there was almost no brewsters that were single women, as they were slowly being kicked out of the industry. This has happened kind of repeatedly throughout history, that as businesses begin to thrive, women are pushed down towards the bottom. There's a quote from one of the papers that I read that was, if an industry thrives, women get kicked out of it. Because once we get into industrialization, we see fewer and fewer women working as brewsters and more women either working as barmaids, bartenders, or secretaries in the industry. By the time we make it to 1700, there's almost no women in the brewing industry at all, as they slowly get ousted. Prohibition. The Prohibition era came about largely because of the temperance movement. The temperance movement was a movement in mostly the Americas and the UK, but also globally, that were attempting to get rid of what they saw as one of the largest problems in their life in the early 1900s, which was alcohol. Now, why was this? One of the main reasons is because men would come home incredibly wasted and they would beat their wives and children, and this was really bad. And so women who were in the era of the second feminist wave attempting to get voting rights were very much attempting to advocate for this as well. One of the largest, most famous people in the Prohibition movement was a lady named Carrie Nation. Carrie Nation was also known as Hatchet Crown. This lady was so cool. She, first of all, would go into bars with a hatchet as an old woman who was also dressed like a nun, and she would go and she would smash up all of their liquor and beer. She would do this because she believed that alcohol was at the root of most of the evils of society. She got arrested many, many times, and in order to pay bail, she would sell little souvenir hatchets to people around in order to get the money to be able to keep going in her temperance movement. One of the results of the temperance movement was Prohibition, which lasted a little more than 10 years and meant that there was no alcohol in America for the bulk of the 1920s and a bit of the 1930s.
Did someone say no alcohol in America for the 1920s and the 1930s? Because that was a total lie. Genuinely, Prohibition increased the revenue of liquor by 400 times. And who was doing this sale of liquor? Well, it was bootleggers. And who were the bootleggers? Well, for every one male bootlegger, there were 5 female bootleggers. Why is this? Basically, it's because the police in most states weren't allowed to search women because it was seen as unsightly or rude. And so they just didn't. And so some of the biggest bootleggers of the era were women, which is crazy because in most of the time that it took me to write this video, this didn't come up at all. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, if you think about it, I'm sure at least some women were bootleggers. And I looked into it, and some of the most famous bootleggers of the era were women. I'm going to tell you about one specific one, lady called Cleo Lifego, and she started up as a bootlegger, and then she moved to the Bahamas and became a liquor importer with her own fleet of ships. Her final net worth by the time she was caught was estimated around $1 million at that time. In modern times, that's $16 million. But she probably had more stored away. But she was literally just taking liquor from the Bahamas, bringing it to the Americas, and selling it. Afterwards, she became a newspaper celebrity. Men would write love letters to her in the newspaper, and she was known as the Queen of the Bootleggers, also known as the Queen of the Bahamas. So in the modern era, there's been many acts of reclamation by women of their rightful space within the brewing industry. There are companies like Hooray's Girl Beer, who is an LA-based company trying to target beer specifically for women. There are organizations like the Women of the Bevolution and Brave Noise that are attempting to make it easier for organizations that would like to have more women within them in the beverage industry to be able to get those employees, and for those employees to be able to feel safe and welcome within those organizations. There's also been a very large movement, especially at the time of the Me Too movement, where women started to report the situations that they were working under and be able to attempt to move the industry forward. Now, while the beverage industry currently has a very low percentage of their employees as women, the number has been growing in recent years, with higher-ups at organizations like Heineken and Anheuser-Busch being women in the C-suite. Now, there still is a lot more work to be done, but a movement has begun to form, and I think that it is very important. And I would like to put someone who is in the forefront of the movement at the center of this conversation.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Erica Anderson. I'm the communications manager for Pink Boots Society Boston, and I also am the president of the New Hampshire chapter.
So my name is Rachel Stillman. I am the brewer at Lost Shoe Brewing and Roasting Company in Marlborough. So Pink Boots Society, their whole thing is to assist, inspire, and encourage women and non-binary people throughout like fermented beverage industry. And so they offer like scholarships, kind of like camaraderie, learning opportunity. I've attended like not only like our small like Boston chapter meetings where, you know, maybe we'll go and talk about loggers, or it'll be like a marketing thing or mental health in the industry. Like it really runs the whole spectrum of front of house, production, sales. And it's not just like for breweries, there's distilleries. We have our malting companies, hop suppliers.
When I was first trying to get into the industry, I just kind of stumbled upon it through other friends who said this would be a great opportunity to kind of meet more people in the industry. And so I just kind of joined up on a whim, and I've been in it ever since.
And then I was working full-time in childcare during COVID, and I got bartending job kind of on the side, largely like, yeah, for the income, but also the social aspect. That's also how I got into Pink Boots. So I was bartending, and then my former brewery hosted a Pink Boots brew day for collaboration beer, invited all the staff to come, and it was a brew day that a lot of things went bad. It was just like a tough day. And I stuck around, and then, you know, was squeegeeing until like 10 o'clock at night. And I didn't realize that that wasn't normal. A lot of the times people will come for, you know, lunch, they'll learn a little bit about the process, they'll do one or two things throughout the day. And I just kind of stuck around. I didn't know that wasn't normal. So when it came time to expand, they offered me a job in production. I grew up on a dairy farm where we like bottled and processed our own milk. So like I kind of wasn't like all the stainless steel and all the squeegeeing wasn't very foreign to me.
How do you think the industry could better support women in the industry?
Just by offering them more opportunities, I think, mostly, whether that's education, just supporting them to pursue more of their passions, having them join the People Society, you know, whatever it may be, just pushing them forward, I think.
If somebody joins Pink Boots, then they kind of see a lot of opportunities. You know, like I think our dues are something like $50 for the year. And it's like even as a starting point, like say you're a beer server, you can get your certified beer server Cicerone. So it's like, especially if breweries want to pay dues for their employees, that's probably the most bang for your buck as far as education and supporting like your female and non-binary staff.
What would you want to say to women outside of the industry considering trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, there's a group here for you already. We're already here. People Society is here to support you and help you through any challenges you might have, help you find a job, help you, you know, further your career. Definitely. And if not us, there's other women in the industry who are here to help for sure.
There's definitely a little bit of divide between I don't want to say old school and new school, but there's definitely some people in the industry, and especially when there's certain brewery names attached to them or anything, that like I have felt very excluded from conversations. You know, going to a conference, and, you know, I've been at a table where I know I've been purposefully excluded from conversation.
Oh, wow.
That Like it hasn't been anything, like it's not like anybody has made kind of like, harassing or bullying comments necessarily, but it's like you can kind of feel when you're being excluded.
Hmm.
Um, I've definitely felt that a little bit, and I definitely think it's a little bit of like old school players.
Mm.
Um, but honestly, that's maybe like 5% of people. It's not a huge concern. I really do love the brewing community and most of the people I cross paths with.
Mm.
Um, but it's like anywhere in life. There's going to be a handful of people that are just really set in their ways and weird.
I wanted to end this video by talking about the first female brewmaster at a major American brewery. This is a lady by the name of Ida Patricia Henry. After never drinking beer, with a degree in chemistry and having been a systems analyst at companies like GE, a fuel company, a railway company, Henry was hired by Miller Brewing Company in 1977, where she became the first female and first African-American brewmaster in the major breweries in the United States. She then worked her way up, being a brewing supervisor, brewing superintendent, brewing unit manager, production services manager, and in 1995, she was the plant manager, which means that she managed over 800 employees. When Henry started, she was the first. But by 2002, when she retired, of the 7 Miller breweries in the United States, 4 of them were headed by Black people, and 3 of them were headed by women. So Henry was really a trailblazer in this space, opening the door for people behind her and helping them into the future. By the time she retired, her role at Miller was Director of Strategic Projects. This reclamation of space in the 20th and 21st century has really been inspirational, but there's still a lot more work to do. So what can we do? Well, I'm going to give Rachel the last word on this.
I guess as kind of a final note,
Mm-hmm.
I encourage people to like join Pink Boots, make a Pink Boots beer. Your staff doesn't need to be experts. If you're a brewery, distillery, and you want to do something with Pink Boots, and also like for women in the industry, whether it's Pink Boots or it's other avenues, seek out community, seek out scholarships, education where you can, and no one knows everything. Just be comfortable taking up space, asking questions, and it'll take you pretty far.